Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. The Gallery Bar Book and Games here in Atlantic City. We're here every Monday. You get your Gallery Bar Book and Games every Monday with us, Mike and Pete. And, of course, every day at 4 o'clock, you get Football at 4. Adam Capel and Andrew DeCecco, and this man right here. It's a Monday with Mosher. Geoff Mosher's in the house. Eagles win 4-0, quarter pole of the season. And really, Jeff, I would imagine this is one of the more impressive ways that they won yesterday. Down 14, got back, took the lead, and then, man, really dominated. Once they got the lead in that game, they really dominated that game from that point forward. That was an impressive win, the way that they persevered, came back, and then took control.
Yeah, they definitely did not panic down 14-0. They reestablished what they are, when they have adversity, which they haven't had a lot of this year, but what they are and what they can be is a very, very dangerous running team. And they ran against the team that was number one so far in the early going in rush defense. Last year when they beat the Saints, that was kind of considered a very signature win, not only because they won the game, but because they ran very, very roughshod over the Saints, who had the number one defense at the time against the run. So that's their bread and butter when they want it to be, and they were able to get to that in a game where the elements were obviously causing them both teams a lot of issues. And what stands out is that the turnovers are obviously big, but they controlled time of possession almost 2-1. I think they had the ball 40 minutes, and the Jacksonville Jaguars had it for 20 minutes. You do that and you win the turnover battle, and it's actually it's sort of surprising they didn't win by more, but obviously the elements got in that, because normally if you out possess an opponent 2-1 and then are +4 in the takeaway margin, you're probably winning that game by 15 or more points, but it was close a little bit there at the end.
Yeah, I mean, they ran the ball 50 times yesterday, over 200 yards rushing. And really, I mean, it wasn't one of those games where Hurts' numbers jumped off the page, but what role did he have in why they won that game?
Well, I think that you're making a really good point about the running game overall, is that for the first time in maybe a while, you can actually say the running game was not necessarily boosted by Jalen Hurts' runs. He averaged like 2-point-something yards per carry. So that really speaks to what Miles Sanders and Gainwell and Trey Sermon a little bit, mostly Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is a bell cow yesterday. He was durable, he was reliable. It's almost ironic that the one game that the Eagles coaches decide to trust Miles Sanders quarter is a game where it's slippery, all sorts of turnovers going on, because that's the fear that they've always had with him, apparently, by not in the fourth quarter. But he proved it for one game. And I think what Jalen Hurts did was, after throwing a bad interception that was returned for a touchdown, I just think he kept calm, was stable. He made the throws that he had to make as the game went on, and did not put the ball in harm's way. You saw Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he could barely hang on to the football. There were some unforced errors and there were some forced errors, but Jalen Hurts, who has been a caretaker of the football ever since he became the Eagles quarterback, was yet again, after that interception, a good caretaker.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, are somewhere on the fence, not sure what to think of Hurts, but I guess he continues to keep winning people over, including Jeff, his own coaching staff. It seems that they are not asking questions about Jalen Hurts anymore, at least internally.
There's really nothing to ask at this point. I mean, he's not a perfect quarterback, but nobody is. He makes mistakes in the game, but he also makes – and now the difference between this year and last year is he makes far more good plays in the passing game especially than he does make mistakes. So, yeah, I mean, there's still occasionally plays where you probably should have hit a guy and didn't see it, or got out of the pocket when he could have stayed, but those are fewer and further between, and he makes up with – really good, mechanics now, good throwing of the football, good decision making.
Geoff Mosher's with us. We talk Eagles and Jaguars, and the messy conditions yesterday certainly played a factor. And you were talking about Jalen Hurts and how he protected the ball. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence on the other side wasn't able to protect the ball. But I think what I'm curious most to ask you, Jeff, is about where week one we were all calling for Gannon's head, and then in the last 3 weeks they've given up 7 points, 6 points, and now 14 to the Jaguars. Which side of the football are you more impressed with at the quarter pole? Is it the offensive side of the football or the defensive side?
Man, it's really hard to pick one, Pete. I tell you what, I tell you, special teams not getting into that conversation. It's definitely either offense or defense. But I guess from an expectation standpoint, defense, because what's been impressive to me, Pete, is that they have so many new starters. The offensive side really only has one. He's very pivotal,
right?
A.J. Brown, but he's really just one new starter. Whereas defense, you literally have a starter who was traded for the week before the season began, and he's playing a position that he didn't play for most of his career. That's Chauncey Gardner-Johnson now playing safety when he's really played the nickel spot. So to have them come together, they're playing what should be considered simple schemes, but it's actually not. Matchup zone coverage is not easy. It's got a combination of man on the inside or man on the outside, zone on the inside, which they're doing a lot of. Which is it requires communication, and obviously this is a group that hasn't played a whole lot of ball together. So I am impressed with how they've been able to come together and carry out those instructions when they really haven't seen a lot of time with each other.
Are we finally seeing the Hassan Reddick that they thought they were going to get when they picked him up and went out and signed him? Is that the Hassan Reddick?
No. You saw Hassan Reddick that I don't think anybody thought the Eagles were getting yesterday, because there were some power bull rush moves in there. That last sack that he caused, where he pushed Jawan Taylor basically out of the way and strip sacked the quarterback, was not the book on Hassan Reddick. The book would be more that he was going to race around Jawan Taylor before Taylor could even get his hands on him. So that was actually an impressive display of speed to power that I would say was not – you're probably not going to see that very often. Maybe he caught Jawan on a bad day, or Jawan just not being a very good right tackle. But to your point, Pete, yes, you're finally seeing the production that people expected with Hassan Reddick. And I think some of that's going to come with Jonathan Gannon learning how to use him. I think on that sack that we just spoke about, he lined up as a defensive end, not just as a stand-up rusher. So it's good to see that they're working different ways. He's a guy that you just don't play in one spot for 70 snaps and line up over left tackle or right tackle and say, beat that guy, beat that guy. You've got to move him around. He's very athletic. You can twist. You can stunt with him. And they are finding different ways to use him.
And a minute ago, you talked about the fact that new faces on defense versus only one new face on offense being A.J. Brown. I thought A.J. Brown, he had the quiet good game yesterday. In fact, even I think I saw at his locker afterwards, he sheepishly was like, look, this isn't a game where I'm supposed to be the guy. Like, this is the game where you're going to throw the football. But 5 catches for 95 yards, you look at the stat line at the end and you go, oh, wow, I didn't realize Brown was that effective.
I tell you, even when he makes, like, his first catch was a simple zone beater, slant over the zone, and Jalen did a nice job of throwing the ball. And just the way his second catch, the way he sort of grabs the ball, then sort of has that change of direction where he catches everybody off guard and starts going the other way. I'm telling you, you guys probably feel the same way. In 20, 30 years, however many years of watching Eagles football, like I wasn't there for the PP host days, of course, and certainly when Carmichael and Quick played together, Carmichael was on the downside of his career. It wasn't very long, but I cannot remember a combination like this. And Macklin and Jackson were good, but what these guys can do after the catch or with the ball in their hands is just something that we are not accustomed to seeing as either Eagles fans or Eagles media. And I'm enjoying every second of it, just even from a reporter standpoint.
Yeah, I know that, you talk about this league and the pushback, Jeff, that you'll get from people, and I want to see what you think about this is, well, they haven't beaten anybody. They're not playing any good defenses. They haven't beaten a good quarterback. And my retort kind of is, neither is anybody else. The whole league is filled with mediocrity to where – how many teams in this league, if you actually won, would you say, I'm impressed that you won? Like, there's just so much parity and mediocrity that almost no team is going to get credit for an impressive victory.
You're probably right. I don't really hear that except for people who I think aren't Eagles fans and are using that against the Eagles, but there's certainly that part of the element that you look around the league and you just see, like, you see a lot of quarterbacks starting for teams that are just not good. or not special, I should say. You know, I mean, we're all good in their own way, but they're just a lot of mediocre teams. But in fairness to the Eagles, you know, like it seems like people want to say that after the Eagles beat a team, but you know, the Jacksonville Jaguars, again, were the top-ranked rush defense coming in. Trevor Lawrence had only turned the ball over one time, one interception in 111 attempts. So is it that all of a sudden these teams and quarterbacks look bad on the day they're supposed to face the Eagles, like they come back to being, you know, average? Or is it the Eagles are making them look average? Because the Minnesota Vikings are 3-1. Everybody wants to say how bad they look when the Eagles played them, and it's just Kirk Cousins. Well, they're 3-1 now, with their only loss being the Eagles. And who else did they beat that I thought has sort of who was week 2? Was that Minnesota?
They beat Detroit, Minnesota, Washington.
Yeah, Detroit doesn't look like a fair. You know, Detroit. That team does not quit. I mean, I couldn't believe that the game was still going on an hour after the Eagles game had ended. I mean, they were out there fighting without like 7 starters and almost came back to win that game. So I don't know. It seems to me that you should just look at the Eagles and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, maybe you haven't played a powerhouse, but you know, when you are playing teams, you're playing well, and some of them you're defeating by double-digit points.
I'm just not sure there is a, you know, outside if you played Kansas City or Buffalo, even, I mean, other than that, I don't know who else you could really play to gain credibility, right? I mean, who else are you beating to say?
I mean, well, look, I mean, I think people will say it, but I will disagree. I think Dallas is a good team, whether they've got Dak Prescott or Cooper Rush. So if the Eagles beat Dallas in 2 weeks, I'm going to consider that a really good win. I think they've got a top 3 defense in the NFL, maybe the best defense in the NFL. And I don't think it's going to be an easy game for the Eagles. And if they lose, I'm not going to be the guy who's sitting here saying they weren't real, they didn't beat a good team, they can't beat Dallas. I'm going to be the guy who says they had a bad game maybe and lost.
Yeah.
Because that's just how it is. But you're right, there's not a lot of measuring stick teams here until you get to the latter half of the schedule.
Yeah, week 12 they play Green Bay. That'll be the best quarterback they face. Other than that, I mean, there's just not a quarterback or some top-level defense that they're going to see. So if you are a detractor, you will remain one, because they will not have a team on this this schedule that will win you over. But what has won some people over, Moshe, and Pete kind of hit a little bit on John Gannon, is he doing anything differently? Is John Gannon evolving as a coordinator? Is he doing anything differently? What are you seeing different about John Gannon and the way maybe he's calling his defense?
I mean, you might as well not call him John Gannon. That's how differently he's doing things this year. Which, you know, he basically said in more, sometimes in minced words last year, but in other words this year, that, you know, he needed certain types of players to carry out what he wanted to do. And he did not. What he did last year was just sort of what Ed Donatel did to the Eagles week 2, right? Sit back, sit back, sit back. But now he blitzes more. He does not blitz like Todd Bowles, but he selectively blitzes at times that I think catch opponents off guard, like not just on 3rd and medium or 3rd and long. He'll blitz on a 1st or a 2nd down to try to catch the opponent off guard and get them to make a mistake. And then, like I mentioned before, he's playing a very I think impactful, and also a defense you're seeing a lot of teams play lately, a matchup type zone where you've got a lot of guys in the interior switching off based on the route concept, and that's making it hard for quarterbacks to get to their first read. And as you saw with, per se, Carson Wentz, if you got a bad offensive line and you're trying to get to read 2, the coverage is there, the Eagles' defensive line can get on top of you pretty quickly.
Geoff Mosher with us. So, Jeff, if anything can derail a good start, it's injuries. Anything that can derail a team is always injuries. Avonte Maddox did not play in this game, right? Darius Slay leaves the game. Okay, how did their replacements fare, and how long can they put up with these guys not able to get on the field before? You know, how long can you bend and not break, I guess, colloquially speaking?
Yeah, well, I think that whole ball control offense thing really helped for some guys on defense, because there were a few times where Josiah Scott, playing that nickel spot that Avonte Maddox played, got exposed. I mean, there were a couple times I was just watching where he was on the wrong defender and a guy got loose because of it. And look, I think that's. I don't want to make an excuse for a guy, but it's his first action of the year. You know, he had been hurt in training camp a lot. He's playing sort of a new position. I think you expect that when a starter goes down and a backup goes in, and the backup is not someone who's like, Cam Jurgens, a second-round pick. You expect a little bit of a drop-off, and you'll see it there. Same thing with Jack Driscoll playing left tackle for the first time. Mm-hmm. I thought as a run blocker he was okay, but as a pass protector, and I'm sure it's because he's not used to the inside foot being his right foot instead of his left foot because he's usually on the right side. You saw him allow inside pressure to the defensive end, so he's going to have to work on that. I'm a little bit worried about Landon Dickerson because, and I'm not a doctor, but just watching tape today, he's dealing with his foot injury, and it looked like to me at times he didn't have his footing right, and I don't know if that's because the foot was bothering him or because maybe it's it was like slip and slide out there with all the rain. So I don't know, but I think it is concerning that a big guy with a foot injury is trying to play through whatever discomfort that he's got. You always think about the NBA. All those big guys who have foot injuries is not a good thing, right? We've seen it here with Ben, with Joel, with Todd McCullough. So that's probably something to watch. But it sounds like Slay will be okay. But, you got Arizona here, and they've got some guys who can stretch the field. So if he can't play, they'll have to figure something out.
Yeah, and if you're going to go feet and NBA injuries, I'm Andrew Toney for me, but that's the one I always go back to.
Andrew Toney, there you go, yeah.
This is what I wanted to ask you, too.
Jeff Rulin.
Jeff Rulin. Well, he got hit by a luggage.
Jeff Rulin's a great one.
He got hit by a luggage cart. That was somebody else's fault in the hotel. Jeff Mosher, how about this anecdote for you? I'm watching the game yesterday, and I see Opeta in there, so I start bad-mouthing Opeta to the room, and then they score a touchdown, and my girlfriend's son turns around and says, see, he doesn't suck. I mean, it's almost like if you and I, Jeff, got coached by Stoutland, we could play a serviceable offensive line.
It does feel that way, doesn't it? Now, the touchdown that you're referring to, that was a rushing touchdown, was it?
I believe so, yes. Yeah. And Kelsey really had the kick-out block, but Opeta was in there and didn't do anything wrong.
Well, no, but that's the point, is that he is a far superior run blocker than is a pass protector.
Okay.
So, to your point, you're not wrong that when you see Sua out there, it gets a little dicey when the quarterback has to drop back. He struggles in that area, but he does have very strong hands. He's country strong, and so in the run game, he does his best work. But yes, you're right in that if Sam Allo is hurt and Opeta has to come in and start a game, then you worry about, especially with the other injuries going on right now at left tackle.
Yeah.
And left guard, you'd be concerned.
And you mentioned Josiah Scott. I mean, am I wrong in my assessment that Zach McPherson still has room to grow, that there's quite a drop-off if Slay's not out there and McPherson is?
Yeah. I mean, that's not even a diss on Zach McPherson more than it is just how important Darius Slay is. One thing Adam and I have said on Inside the Birds for a while is as good as this 53-man roster is and as deep as it is in certain areas, outside cornerback depth is not one of those areas where they're especially deep. So, but I would have said that about the 2017 team, and then Darby went down for 10 games, and they had three different guys from Rasul Douglas to Patrick Robinson to even Jalen Watkins. If you remember, he was getting some time at the outside corner, and they made it work because they had a great pass rush and an overall great team. So perhaps they could compensate this way too.
All right, Geoff Mosher, we'll get you out with this. Quarter poll, 4 games in, 4-0. Would you say this is a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
I think you have to. I mean, sure. I mean, it's easy to say that after 4 games.
Right.
There's only been one 4-0 team in the last 20 years, I think, that didn't make the playoffs, and that was the 2016 Denver Broncos. So, listen, I think they're going to lose some games. I don't think they're going undefeated. And then when they do lose a game, you know what it's going to be like around here. But I certainly think, to your point, when you look at their competition in the NFC, there doesn't seem to be that great, dominant, perfect team.
No.
So
it's funny because they were down 14-0 yesterday. And I said to my girlfriend, son, sometimes work is more fun when the Eagles lose.
Nah.
It's almost like, wait, you want them to lose? I'm like, I'm not asking for them to lose, but, when things are going well, no one's complaining, and,
I know. That's when you got to put the war paint on to deal with the crazies.
Yeah. Now it's just like you got these people out there that just don't like the Eagles, and they're the ones that are, drumming up they haven't played anybody. Well, who has? Nobody. Nobody's played anybody.
By the way, a real interesting point of yesterday's game, I want to ask you guys this actually, is that if Trevor Lawrence doesn't overthrow Agnew, right? In the second quarter, was it the first play and in the end zone there, which would have been a clear touchdown. He had the guy beat by 10 yards. If it becomes 21-0, do the Eagles win that game? Because to me, that's the turning point. I don't know if the Eagles will feel comfortable going to the ground game as much as they did down 3 touchdowns that early.
Well, that, Jeff,
that's an excellent point.
That, Jeff, and, the 4th down and 3, Jacksonville goes for it, and they don't get it. If they end up
that was a few plays later, where he just drops the ball, right?
Yeah, they try to convert that, they don't get it, and then Philly ends up scoring, and then they score again, and then I think the interception was in there somewhere. Yeah, I mean, it was just – and you wonder, like, on a regular day, does Lawrence fumble 4 times?
No, his ball security would have to be better, you'd think, on a dry day. But, I mean, hey, I'll take it any way you can get it.
Sure. But that's my point. Even if you win, there's always blemishes that get hidden up, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Eagles. But, like I said, if you're +4 in a game in takeaways and you run for 200 yards – I guarantee if you go find box scores from NFL history where teams have done that, they've probably won by at least 15 points.
Yeah. Well, and,
it's really
the one
right,
game
a
couple of years ago when they played Denver was like the #1 defense in the league, and it was like the 4th week of the season, and Philly put up a 50 spot on. It was like 51. That was like a statement of that team. It was like, okay, like, wow. They haven't had that, like, because the games have been, they scored 24 points and then they stopped. Yesterday they scored 29, 21. You haven't had an eye-popping score victory, and I think that's another thing. Fans look for the aesthetic of the score.
Yeah, if I'm a fan, I'm just going to start showing up for home games in the second quarter and then leaving after the second quarter because that's like where 80% of the scoring is done.
85
that's where
points.
The games are decided right now,
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. Inside the Birds podcast has a lot more on this breakdown, and they will all week long on the Inside the Birds platforms. And, of course, tomorrow Adam Kaplan will give his thoughts on the game. We'll turn the page to Arizona when Mosher's back on Wednesday here on Football at 4. Thank you, bud.
You got it, guys. Have a great one.
All right, Geoff Mosher here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.